How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
I'm Max.
And welcome back to another episode of Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask that titular question. Because when every movie ever made isn't a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
So don't look back and don't give in to nostalgia as we dive into Giuseppe Tornatore's Cinema Paradiso from 1988. Keep it in, Parker.
We're keeping it in. We're keeping it in.
I like to remind people that I'm not perfect.
Yes.
You know?
Contrary to popular belief, Max
I'm not
Bennion,
perfect.
not perfect. Not a perfect guy.
I make mistakes from time to time.
Human being.
You know how it is.
You know how it is.
Cinema Paradiso, Parker.
Yeah.
You hadn't seen this in a few years.
It had been a minute, yeah.
Yeah. Returning to it, I think we both had the same gut punch reaction.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you and I both are going through personal life changes in the next, little bit. And so it's sort of like, oh, yeah, keep moving forward. Don't look at the past, like all this stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. You picked Cinema Paradiso,
I did.
Parker.
Yes.
What made you pick Cinema Paradiso for the show?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, what's your history with Cinema Paradiso?
So I picked it for the show because I thought it would be just a really fun movie to compare, just because it is very kind of beloved in the film community in so many different ways. And I thought that would be just interesting to kind of jump into and talk about. As far as my history with it, I came across this movie for the first time back in 2021, so a few years ago. And I'd heard it mentioned before. I had seen a couple of clips of the end montage, but completely out of context. I had no idea what the purpose was behind any of this. But yeah, just sort of on a whim, I finally decided, I was like, I should check this out. I've been meaning to watch this, and it just bowled me over. Immediately, top 5 all-time movie, just shot up in my personal ranking of wow, where has this movie been all my life? To the point that I remember posting about it on Facebook, being it's an amazing feeling when you find a movie that immediately becomes one of your favorites. And one of my best friends from high school, he commented and he's like, I'm shocked you hadn't seen this. He's like, this is such a Venn diagram of Parker that I just had assumed this was a fundamental core text to your upbringing. And I was like, no, it's all new to me.
Italian 80s film Cinema Paradiso wasn't a touch point reference
surprisingly
for people in
no.
Idaho growing up.
It's one of those things. I was shocked too. I was very surprised, but here we are. But yeah, so that was kind of my history with it, and I've revisited it a few times since then. This was my 4th watch according to Letterboxd.
Wow.
And the last time I watched it, I was actually in Italy.
Oh yeah,
I was off,
and they played the theme.
Yeah, so I was in Italy teaching a study abroad for some undergraduates, and while I was there, so I watched the movie while I was there, and I was just like, man, it's so good to watch it here. And then on that same trip, I went to Venice for the day, and out in one of the plazas, there was a live band outside of one of the restaurants, and they were just playing it was show tunes. It was Golden Age, Hello Dolly, Oklahoma kind of stuff. And then they started playing the theme to Cinema Paradiso, and I just started bawling in the middle of the square. I was like, oh my God, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty magical.
Did the square belong to you while you were on that trip?
It did, yeah. That was my square.
It was yours.
And I made sure everybody knew it.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah, well, that's what you'd have to do.
Yeah.
If you owned the square, you would make sure everyone knew that.
Everybody needs to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cinema Paradiso, for me, never once heard of it until you told me to check it out.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Parker was I don't know, it probably came up pretty early on. We were probably talking about favorite movies. And if you saw it for the first time in 2021, I don't know when that was.
It was, so I watched it February 2021 for the first time. And then I watched it again a couple months later in June or July. And that's probably
okay. So
when
it was probably after your June or July watch then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just brought it up and you were just like, wow, it's a great film. And I think I didn't see it until 2022, maybe.
Okay.
Or maybe I checked it out later that year. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I don't think there's anyone out there who's like actively, tracking our timeline.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
And if you want to, just follow us on Letterboxd. That's the best way to see it.
Yeah.
But I watched it and I remember really liking it, but also I remember trying to view it through the lens of Parker loves this movie.
Oh no.
So I have to love this movie.
No, Max, no.
And what does Parker love about this movie? And that's how I watched it the first time. And I was like, I didn't cry the whole time like Parker said he did. And so I was like, I guess, oh no. I was really weirdly worried about that.
Sure.
So this is my second watch that I did for this show. And I liked it a lot more because I was free from the burden of watching it.
You seem
as
to do
Parker
this
Rawlins.
to yourself a lot. We talk about this a lot, where like Max seems to carry around this baggage, this guilt, this pressure of when somebody recommends a movie to him, especially me. Suddenly there's like this expectation around it.
Yeah,
you gotta stop.
I have to like it.
Get some
Parker.
help.
No. No.
No, I won't. I refuse.
Parker, you heard that thing you do episode. It's just cope. I just have to cope with me not loving movies you love. You. Anyway. Beautiful movie. I have some notes. I took notes for the first time since maybe Vertigo.
Whoa, okay.
I just forgot I was going to take notes every week. And then I was like, I should take notes. So I took notes, everybody.
Love that.
I didn't do any research.
I
did. You do any research? Woohoo!
Not as much as I wanted to. I was really bummed because I'm between homes right now. I'm crashing with my brother. So most of my stuff is in a storage unit, including all of my movies. And it really bums me out because there's some really good documentaries like on the Blu-ray that I've seen, but like I it's all back there somewhere. I wish I could have refreshed my memory. I didn't have access to those.
Man, I should have watched those.
No, it's okay. I did some digging. I found some good stuff from interviews and things, so we're okay. Mostly
great.
Just wanted to tell everybody I wish I had more to talk about because there's a lot of good stuff out there that I just couldn't access.
Do your own research. That's what I always say.
Do your own research. Actually.
Don't listen to us. Do your own research.
But yes, I do have some research.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask as well, Parker. Obviously, we'll do a little bit of a summary, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But what is like the first moment in this movie that gets you?
Ooh.
And I know you could just say from the opening moment because now you know the emotional context of the movie.
Sure.
But like, what would you say is like the first moment within the movie that like either got you emotionally the first time you watched it or still does, that sort of thing?
As far as like emotional goes, the first time I start like getting a little sniffly is probably the whole sequence straight through from Alfredo turning the light and moving the picture out into the square through to the fire. I think I get a little sniffly through there. The first time that like it gets me like feeling emotions in a big way, there's something very magical just about that shot of him peeking his head through the curtains, watching as the priest is reviewing the film. There's just something very charming about that. What about you?
I was specifically going to say, I shouldn't have asked you because I knew that you'd say the same thing as me. It's moving the picture. Yeah. It's moving, the projection across the wall, but specifically Alfredo saying abracadabra and we pass through walls. And then this floating projection image just kind of moving across walls and out the window and just like moving cinema outside of those walls. Like that's a magic trick.
It's a magic trick, and we're going to talk about it a ton throughout the episode, but like Ennio Morricone's score in this is just kind of transcendent.
Yeah, I took one note. I took one note where I just said, my God, Ennio Morricone's score.
Yeah.
And then my next note said, my God, Salvatore's sweaters.
He's got some good sweaters.
I had forgotten about his good sweaters when he's in his teen years. Those 50s sweaters, man. Yeah. Well, great. Do you want to do some background on Cinema Paradiso?
Okay, so like you said at the top of the episode, this is directed by Giuseppe Tornatore. And he began his filmmaking career, he started making documentaries, and he did that from the ages of like 15 to 25. Like that was just something he did. He would just document life in Sicily. And he met a lot of young filmmakers during this time. They formed a little production company out of Sicily that would kind of do all this stuff, to the point that when he was about 20, 25, 26, a more well-established filmmaker came to film something in Palermo, and Tornatore was chosen to help him out because he was like the president of the company. So that's his first. He was an executive producer on this film. Like, he got brought on very early as like, hey, you know the area, you know these people, like you could be very useful. And that was his first experience on like a narrative film. That whole experience helps him decide that he wants to make a narrative feature for the first time. The distributor of that film, he wanted him to, he was a well-known producer in his own right. And he's like, hey, I really want you to produce my first feature. And so they made their first feature together, and it was a good learning experience. I don't know that it has much of a cultural impact from what I understand, but he said it, got his feet wet. And he talked about in the interview, he's like, the second film is always more difficult than the first because you want to be more ambitious with it. Like, you're pushing yourself harder. Yeah. And this was his second film. And he went and pitched it to this previous producer, and he wasn't really crazy about just the basic concept when he first started, because all he told me is like, I think I'd like to make a movie about like, cinema and cinemas and movie theaters. And his producer was like, hey, like, cinemas are dying right now. Like, I saw that they were talking about like the year the film is set at the very beginning, which I think is 23, 24, something like that, 1923. The entire filmic output of Italy was only 20 films, and only 3 years earlier it was like 220 films. So like at that time, like, cinema was very much dying in Italy in a lot of ways. And so his producer, fast forward to the 80s, his producer, they're kind of experiencing something similar. He's like, look, box office receipts are down for everything. Nobody's going to the movie theater anymore. It's all about video. It's all about TV. Like, I don't think this is going to be a good idea.
Right. Classic, like, Boogie Nights situation.
Yeah. But Giuseppe sits down and he pitches him like the movie. He gives him like a treatment, and he's so moved by it, this producer. He's like, you go off, go write this, and like, I think it's got a shot. Ended up, like, he goes and writes the script. He ends up working with a different producer, but like this first producer, he says, was like huge for him to like be the motivation to write the script and like get the picture off the ground. So it's a very autobiographical movie in a lot of ways. A huge, like, Toto is very much inspired by Giuseppe and his experiences growing up, specifically like his love of the theater and the projection booth. Was like, he was very fascinated by that and would spend a lot of time in like his local cinema up in those spaces. So that's kind of, it's very much like a film coming from the filmmaker's heart in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Something I thought was interesting is that he's kind of known for working with more inexperienced actors, especially child actors, because he likes that rawness, that kind of natural quality to them. So he saw nearly 300 boys for the role of Toto as like a child, before settling on actors.
Like that was his goal.
Yeah.
His goal was initially he wanted 300.
Yeah, he was like, okay,
boys.
We need 300. Yeah, it's going to be a real Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. But
I initially saw 300 boys for the role of Toto, but
decided to pare it down.
I was talked into paring it down.
So eventually he did
to just two.
Just two. He did pare it down to Salvatore Casillo. And something I thought was interesting in the interview is that he's like, I cast him because he is Toto. Like, you talk to this kid and he just has that energy and enthusiasm, and I didn't have to direct him very much. Also, it was very easy for him because his name is also Salvatore. And when you're working with very young kids,
of course,
just having it be their name makes it so much easier for them to know that, hey, I'm talking to you, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So he said that he just cast him because he's like, yeah, he is me as a child. And that was very easy and malleable to kind of shape a performance around. And he does a really good job. Like, to the point, I think you and I talked about this before, like when we talked about the movie. Like, you're almost disappointed when the time jump happens He's like, oh, we don't get to see him anymore. Like, little Toto's gone, and he's really great.
Yeah, that's true. But I do love Teen Salvatore.
Oh, he's really good.
I think
too.
he's also doing a great job. But yes,
Yeah.
When you lose the kid, it's.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk about that.
Totally.
I have thoughts on that too.
So the initial cut of the film was 155 minutes, and it was received very poorly by critics. It ran twice in Italy. It was released twice before Cannes, and it flopped both times. And so Tornatore sat down and he restructured it. He cut it out. He got it down to 124 minutes, which was the version that was released internationally. And that's the one that went on to go gangbusters. It won the Special Jury Prize at Cannes that year in 1989. It won the Golden Globe and Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film.
Wow.
It was nominated for 11 BAFTAs, and it won 5 of them, which was Best Foreign Language Film, Best Actor for Felipe Noret, which I'm butchering his name, but Alfredo. Best Supporting Actor for Salvatore Casillo, Little Toto. Best Original Screenplay, and Best Score.
Wow, at the BAFTAs.
At the BAFTAs, yeah.
Wow, I feel like the BAFTAs are not usually so welcoming to international films.
Not at all. So
that's fascinating.
It's very, very interesting. It swept. And it was actually very popular in Europe. It ran for a year in France. That was where it made the most money in France.
Now that makes sense. That makes sense. The French go, oh, le cinéma.
Well, it's interesting because the actor playing...
Sorry, everyone.
The actor playing Alfredo, Felipe, he's French. He did the whole movie in French, in his native language, and then he was dubbed over.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so when you watch the movie, it's not his voice?
No. Different actor.
What?
Yeah. But in the French dub, he voices himself.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine, Parker. Yeah, great. Thanks. You ruined it. 1 star.
1 star. Thanks.
No, that's amazing. That's a great dub then, because I mean, it helps that like Italian is
granted,
French and Italian
keep
have
in mind
similarities.
that with my research, there's surprisingly not a lot about the behind the scenes on this online anywhere. I only found one place saying that he was dubbed by somebody else, so I need to try and corroborate that.
They were keeping it secret. Why?
Why? What's being hidden? What's the conspiracy?
Do your own research, everyone. I don't want to double down on that. I'm sorry.
So on a budget of $5 million, it earned $36 million worldwide. Again,
what was the budget?
$5 million.
Okay.
And it made 36.
Yeah.
It kind of it did great for itself.
Way to go, Giuseppe.
So something very interesting, go ahead.
Second feature for him?
Yes.
This is only his second narrative feature.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
crazy. So we're going to talk about this more at the end. Once we're done with the summary, I want to get into more of these details, but I'll mention it here to kind of bookend us. In 2002, he went back and put together a director's cut that was released. It did a theatrical run, and then it also was released on home video.
Yeah, because it sounds like he cut out 30 minutes for the international version.
He did.
That did well.
And then he came back, and he put 50 minutes back into it.
50?
The director's cut is 173 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
That's, okay, so like 3 hour Cinema Paradiso. Okay, I'm very interested in that. Is that
so
what we're going to come back to
We're going to come
later?
back to that. I've got some stuff to talk about with that, but I want to get through the summary first to kind of go over the changes. But so that's the general overview of my research.
Great. I'll just do a quick summary here, if that's okay. Cinema Paradiso opens in the 80s, and an old woman is trying to call her son Salvatore, or as they call him, Toto. He's not answering. He hasn't been in town for 30 years?
Yeah.
Is that
she has not heard from him in 30 years.
She hasn't heard from him in 30 years and is trying to reach him. We go to Salvatore. He gets home. A woman's in his bed, and she says, yeah, your mother called. She thought I was someone else. She said that someone died. Alfredo. And Salvatore leans over in bed, and some wind chimes go, and he looks very forlorn. And then we go back into his childhood.
Yeah.
When he was but a boy named Toto. In year 5, no less. So I don't know what that means in Italian school. That would make him 9.
About
9 or 10. 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes okay. So it's like the mid to late 40s. Toto's dad went to war and never came back. And his mother is just trying her best to raise these two kids. She has Toto and she has his sister. And Toto he is a, what is it called? Altar boy.
Yeah.
Altar boy?
Yeah, altar boy.
Yeah. So, but he keeps falling asleep. He keeps falling asleep during mass. And the priest is annoyed by this. And he says, I know why you're so tired all the time. Stop, but he doesn't say it. But then the priest goes off to, he kind of scolds Toto and he goes off to do his ritual of censoring films that are shown at the local Cinema Paradiso.
Right.
He does this by watching the films and ringing a bell anytime there's something that he considers pornographic. So kisses, scantily clad women,
violence,
that sort of thing. Violence.
And the reason he's able to do this is because the church owns the theater.
Yes, that's the best part. The church owns the theater. I wonder if this movie has some sort of comparison you can make between cinema and church.
There's one shot that I think maybe could provide some evidence to you.
Oh?
Yeah,
Oh?
Yeah,
what's the shot, Parker? Parker, what could the shot be?
A little later in the film, everybody's in town is watching a movie, and there's a shot of the light of the projector going past in the background out of focus, and it seems to be coming out of a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Huh? Wait. Huh?
Visual storytelling?
What do you mean? We'll talk about visual storytelling, Parker. So anyway, he's censoring this, and Toto is watching from the curtains. He's fascinated by this. He loves this. He loves the movies.
He does.
He goes up to talk to Alfredo. And Alfredo's like, I don't want you in here anymore. Like, you, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop trying to take film. Stop it.
Yep.
And Toto, as he leaves, kind of like grabs a little slip of film and like stuffs it in his
And he
pocket.
makes him a deal. He's like, look, if you will leave me alone, all of this film in this bin is yours. He's like, but the condition is it stays here. Like, and you don't come up here anymore.
He's like, that's not fair. If it's mine, why do you get to keep it? And then he like kicks him in the pants or whatever. Yeah. A lot of kicking Toto in the pants.
Toto's little screams as he run away is always funny to me. Like when Alfredo like growls him, he's like, ah! It's good.
Yeah, it's great. Like a little alien in the Phantom Menace.
He sounds like E.T.
Yeah. So Toto goes home and he's just like putting film in front of a lamp and looking at it and saying lines that he remembers, right? Yeah. And he stuffs it all back in its container to go to bed, and he puts it under his bed.
And there's pictures of his dad in there.
Yes, there's also pictures of his dad in there.
And he keeps asking his mom, like, when's dad coming back? She's like, he's rushes along. It's far away. Takes years to get there, years to come back.
Which is true.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, from Sicily?
Time. Yeah.
Long way.
Sicily to Russia? During wartime? What happens from there, Parker? I can't quite remember exactly what's...
From there,
we see Toto at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Toto's at school. He's got a friend with a birthmark on his forehead who's dumb as nails. and Toto has to...
He tries to help him, and
it
just doesn't
tries to help him, and it just doesn't work. And he keeps getting his head hit into a chalkboard.
Yeah. Different times.
Wild times. Different times. Yeah. So Toto's at school. He's having a good time, but really he loves the cinema. Yeah. And we start to see how the community engages with the cinema. So people go in and they, as people walk in to fill the seats, they're like, good evening, everyone. And everyone's like, shh. But like, there's this sense of like older people in the community still just being like, hello, like trying to be, sociable.
And there's
right?
There's the cheap seats and then there's the balcony seats. And that's kind of a big deal right now.
Huh?
Oh.
You think there's something about class here?
Crazy. I know.
I don't know, Parker. I don't know.
Seems like a stretch.
I don't know. Something about church and cinema being the two places where both classes have to come together. What?
What?
Anyway, yeah. So this guy keeps spitting on people, and they hate that shit. And people just like to watch movies together. They have a good time. Yeah. But they're all lamenting the fact that they never get to see a kiss on screen.
Yeah. Everybody like leans in as like a kiss is coming, and then it cuts, and they all just like groan and throw shit at the screen.
Yeah. Toto has told Alfredo that told the manager that he had a ticket this time. So he goes in and he gets to watch the movie. He comes out, his mother's waiting for him.
Yep.
His mom's like, I gave you money to get milk. Did you get milk? And he says, no. She's like, do you still have the money?
He's like, it was stolen.
He says, I was robbed. And she goes, no, you went to the cinema, and starts beating him in the square. Also, there's a guy who says that the square is his. He loves the square.
Every night at midnight, he's like, everybody out, I'm closing the square. It's mine.
Yeah. So anyway, Alfredo sees this and he's like, "Whoa, hey, actually, Toto, why would you lie about this? You know you get in for free," which is very sweet and very cute. And then he asks the usher guy, he's like, "Oh, what did you find under the seats today?" And he's like, "I found a comb, and I found this,
Found a heel,
found this, and a heel. So 2 heels. Yeah. He found two heels. And I'm like, somebody out there either lost both their heels, or there's 2 people just hobbling around.
I think it's 2 different people.
I think it's 2 different people, and then they find their heels together, and then that's how they end up together.
Yeah, that's the movie inside this movie.
Yeah, there's a movie inside. Not to be confused with the other movies that are inside this movie.
Don't, yeah.
Including previous Better Than Citizen Kane candidate, City Lights.
Indeed.
Yeah, previous contender. That was fun. It was a fun little... I was like, oh, City Lights.
I know that.
Hey, I know that one. So anyway, Alfredo does this very clever little like sleight of hand trick to be like, and the money.
Yep.
And so then he's like, here you go. And she's like, thanks, Alfredo.
And she's kind of wise to it. Like, you can tell
she's wise
like,
to it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. They go home, and then the next day they're coming back from church, right?
Yeah, yeah. Toto's working like a funeral. There's like a funeral procession, and he's walking back with the priest.
And then Alfredo goes along on his bike, and Toto pretends that his feet hurt so that he gets on Alfredo's bike. And he and Alfredo are just having a good time talking as they go along. Alfredo quotes a lot of movies.
He does.
That's something about Alfredo, is he quotes a lot of movies. And then as they arrive at home, something horrible has happened.
Yes.
And Toto's mom starts beating him again because he left his film canister of film next to the fire and nearly burned the house down and nearly killed his sister.
Yeah. Burned up all of his dad's photos.
Yeah, burned up all of the photos. But not all of the photos.
Yeah. A lot of them.
Because later, we'll get to that. But a lot of them, yeah. So yeah, she's just really mad at him. And does Alfredo step in much? He steps in a little.
He's like, look, it's my fault. Don't blame the boy. She's like, it is your fault. Like, keep him away from the theater. Like, you give me your
don't let
word.
him in. Yeah, and he says, I give you my word, I won't let him in anymore. So the next day, Toto's at the theater. He's watching a movie, though. Yeah. And there's this really great, the projector comes out of a lion's mouth, which is fantastic. And Parker, I think that we should 3D print you a little 3D lion's head that goes over your projector.
To go on I think we need it. I think that would be
wonderful. And Toto keeps looking back, and he's like, can I come up? Like, he's gesturing, and Alfredo goes, no.
He's got a little window, and it's just his mouth.
Got a little window, and it's just his mouth, and he goes, no. And then Toto sees Alfredo's wife coming with the lunch for him, and he's like, wait, Senora Anna. And he runs out. He takes the lunch up to him, and he's like, you can't be mad at me. Your wife said I need to bring you your lunch.
Yeah. Finds his loophole. He gets up there, and he is talking to Alfredo, and this is where we see that Toto has been watching very closely. Yes.
And replicates Alfredo's movements of like changing the reel over.
Yeah, like
right?
Alfredo's talking to him about like the importance of like, you have to keep an eye on this stuff. Like, you know, if it burns up, all of these things. Like, he's teaching him about the projector, and he goes in the other room to like take a piss, and the reel needs to be changed over at that time, and Toto just does it. Yeah,
and then Alfredo comes out, and he's like, hey! And then he like kicks him in the pants.
Yeah, he's like, you stop messing with my stuff, you're tricking me, get out!
Yeah, kicks him out.
Mentioning the lion, I think it's during either that scene or the first time he's in the theater, there's this really great shot of him looking back at the projector, and it like zooms in and does like a Dutch angle, and it morphs, and the lion comes to life. It like roars and opens its mouth, and it's
Toto's
really
like,
cool.
ah! Yeah. And in the midst of all this, there's a lot of guys like, you know, laughing and hitting each other in the theater, and everyone just being a community.
Yeah, you've got like
and crying together.
We're going to talk about this more as the movie goes on, but like one of my favorite things about this movie is all of the community members, like the distinct characters going on there of like the dude who always falls asleep and the lower class guy falling in love with the upper class lady up in the balcony because they're the two people who aren't scared by the horror movie. And like, I love all of the characters that show up in this. It just makes the town feel so alive.
Absolutely. I feel like that must come from his background as a documentarian in
Totally.
Sicily, right?
Yeah,
like he knows like, you know, what life looks like and how he can kind of replicate that, which is a really interesting point that I would not have thought of. I didn't know that he had been making documentaries for 10 years. Yeah, like the community is very much alive here, which is really wonderful. We also missed, or maybe we haven't gotten there yet, but what city is he from? He's from the north. There's a North Italian.
Yeah. He's a North Italian. He's Naples.
Naples, yeah, the Neapolitan.
Neapolitan.
The Neapolitan won the lottery,
Mm-hmm.
so he has all this money.
Yeah.
I don't think we're quite there yet, but
I think it's like right after that scene, though. Like I think it's
Yeah.
like everybody comes out of the theater because
Yeah.
everybody's screaming across the square. They're like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah. So, so Toto has kind of wormed his way back in,
Mm-hmm.
And he goes up to visit Alfredo again a few times, right? And they talk about movies. They talk about
Mm-hmm.
and then at a certain point, the theater is ushering everyone out.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, but we didn't get to see the movie that we wanted to see." What is it? It's like something like that. Where they're
Again,
like, hey.
I think it's they're kicking out the poor people. Like,
Oh,
it's
okay,
everybody in
that's
the
what it
lower
is.
gallery. It's like, all right, it's private screening now. You guys got to get out.
Private screening, rich. Yeah, all the rich people are in here, so they kick all the poor people out. And they're all like, "Hey, Alfredo, can't you show the movie for us?" And Alfredo and Toto are talking about movies and such, and Alfredo says, something about the mob. There's a quote from a movie about the mob.
He's like, a mob doesn't think for itself, like it has no mind.
Yeah.
He's quoting like Tyrone Powers or something.
Yeah, and then he says, like, if you have no faith in me, have faith in what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like, should we show him the picture? And Toto's like, that would be wonderful, but how?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the beautiful moment that Parker and I love, and he does his little magic trick, and he says, abracadabra, and we pass through the walls, as he like adjusts the little like kind of glass pane that projects.
Yeah, so the projector is still going in the theater, but he's also giving a reflection out the window.
There's a reflection out the window that he directs onto a wall on a house across the street. And everyone cheers, and they also get to watch the movie. And he sets up a little speaker too.
Yeah.
So they can hear the audio. Someone comes out of the house because it's being projected right onto their doors. And his wife's like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's the cinema."
And everybody's like, "Get it! Just close the door."
And then he just goes back in and closes the door. And it's just a really lovely moment.
Yeah.
Really wonderful time. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
No. Well, the priest is shocked to see this, and he tells the usher, he's like, "Go charge half price." Like, half price tickets, and everybody like berates the usher. Like, "Shut
everyone's
up!"
like, "No, we're not going to pay." Toto goes out there, right?
Yeah, he wants to be out amongst the people.
And then, as he's out there, tragedy strikes.
Yep. Alfredo wasn't watching.
Gets too hot. He wasn't watching. And the film burns.
Mm-hmm.
A fire begins in the the projectionist booth at Cinema Paradiso. And it looks like Alfredo just dies.
Yeah.
Like, he's engulfed in flames, and he goes, "Ah!"
Yeah, I was watching with my brother, and it was interesting because like this is the halfway point of the movie. This is exactly like an hour in, and if you weren't paying attention, you might have forgotten that he gets the phone call at the beginning that Alfredo has died.
Yeah.
Because the movie lets you think he's dead for like 5 or 6 minutes, to the point where my brother's like, is he dead?
It's like kind of banking on you not fully remembering.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like interesting to have a film kind of trust that you will be so engrossed by what's been happening that you forget the framing device.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And every once in a while they do cut back to old Salvatore as he like reflects on these things, but not here.
No.
So basically they all are like, "Oh, cinema's gone. Like, we have no entertainment in the village. What are we going to do?"
Well, yeah, because like it all happens. It burns down, and like everybody runs out, and Toto runs in, and that's a shot that almost makes me cry every time.
Yeah.
Is just seeing everybody leaving him just trudging forward.
Yeah, and we even have the priest like on the ground being like, "No, Alfredo, no!"
Like,
and Toto
like, "He's
has
dead."
like pulled him down the his body down the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Which as a little guy, it must be really hard.
It must be really tough.
You're just a little guy.
Alfredo's a big guy, and Toto's a little like.
It's just a little guy.
Yeah.
That's the thing about this movie that really makes it work, is that Alfredo's a big guy and Toto's just a little guy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, whatever. So then the next morning, they all get to go look, and it's all burned down, and they're like, "What will we do now? There's no entertainment."
Mm-hmm.
And the Neapolitan steps forward. And they're like, "Wait, look at Kicchio." I don't know how you'd say it.
Mm-hmm.
But he pays for it with the lottery ticket that he won.
Yeah.
And we see the Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, which is very 80s. And
Very.
It's fantastic. Or rather, not 80s. 50s. I'm sorry. There's just a neon sign.
Yeah, there's a neon sign.
Yeah.
50s.
50s. And it's big and wonderful. And what do you have to say about the Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, Parker?
I think it's a lot of fun. I love the kind of unrestrained nature it has now that it's not owned by the church. Like everybody freaks out when like they're watching a movie and this dude like takes a girl's shawl off and he's kissing your shoulders and they're like, huh? And then they kiss and everybody loses their minds.
Yeah.
Later on, there's a very silly little bit of like some exploitation film of a naked girl on screen. It's just a row of all the teenage boys just taking care of things.
Jorking it. And by it, they mean, well, they're peanuts.
But I like that, like, it feels so much more lived in now. Like, it's just so much more raucous in a lot of ways, which is very fun. So those are the things.
Totally.
What do you like about the Nuovo?
And I mean, I like it as white and blue.
Yeah,
that's
color
fun.
scheme's nice.
Color scheme's nice.
The projection booth is very slick.
It's very slick. So Toto now works as the projectionist.
Yeah.
And as Mr. So-and-so, whatever the Neapolitan says, he's like, no, it's fine. I got a license.
Yeah, because the priest is like, what about child labor laws? And he's like, it's all good. He's like,
it's all good.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the one getting paid.
I'm the projectionist.
But
I'm the
Toto,
projectionist, but the money all goes to Toto.
It all goes to Toto, yep.
So
we found our loophole.
Yeah, they found their loophole. So Toto's up there, and he's like, I guess he's got a little suit on
He's got
now.
A little suit. His mom's so proud.
She's so proud. She came around, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can almost burn down the house, but if you turn it into an actual career path, then I think you're set.
One thing we did forget, just as a cute little moment that I like a lot in the midst of the childhood stuff, is on their bicycle ride, Toto's like, I want to be a projectionist, and Alfredo's like, you don't want to do that. He's like, you're too smart to do that. He's like, you have to be somebody stupid like me. And later we see Toto taking some sort of exam, and they bring in a few of the adults in the community who are unlearned and illiterate, and Alfredo's there, and he begs Toto. He's like, help, I don't know the answer, help. And he's like, you let me back into the projection booth. And he makes a deal with him.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. I forgot
it's okay.
That.
It's a very, I like that little moment because specifically like that conflict comes up a lot more of like Alfredo being like, I know you love this, but you could be doing so much more.
Yeah. So Toto's like, yeah, it's my job. I'm gonna because Toto's up there and he's like doing the projection. He's like, you know, what a living, you know, work.
Yeah.
And then Alfredo appears. His wife brings him up the stairs, and he's just blind.
Yeah.
He's not dead. He's just
sight.
blind. So for those of us that had forgotten, we now remember that. Oh yeah, Alfredo's just blind.
Yeah.
And they talk about it, and Toto's like, yeah, I guess it's just like, you know, my job. And Alfredo's like, but it's not going to be your whole life. Like, because he's like, how are you going to do school? And Toto's like, I guess I'll just leave school.
He's like, no. You got to go to school.
Right. Is this before he's old?
Yeah. So they have this conversation.
This is when he's still a little kid, right?
Yeah. Because the transition, which I like a lot. I think it's really good.
I was going to mention it. I love the transition, but go ahead.
But just he's talking to him about, he's like, you have so much more to offer the world. Like, you have so much you're going to do. And the way that, like, I can see that. I can see it in your face. And he touches his face and he's like, I see your future. And there's this really lovely just cut of he's touching child Toto's face, and it cuts back to him. And then it cuts back to Toto, and he's now a young adult. He's a teenager.
Yeah, he's 17 probably.
Yeah, and we've had this time jump.
Because it's the 50s now.
Yeah.
Woo! So yeah, we've had this time jump, and he and Alfredo still get to hang out. Yeah, and so we get to see a little bit more of like Salvatore's life as a teenager.
Yeah.
He still works as the projectionist at the theater, but he's still at school, and he also has his own little 8mm, right? 8mm.
It looks like it. It's a little Bolex. I'm guessing it's 8mm. I don't think it'd be 16.
No, I don't think so. So he's shooting 8mm, and he shoots like a calf slaughter, which is like, all right. Ooh, fun, Salvatore. And then he just so happens to see a beautiful girl arrive at the train station.
Yes.
And he films her as well. And he realizes later that she's at his school. And we get these cute little scenes of him like talking to her and like trying to be like, like you left this, you dropped this, here you go.
Yeah.
And she's like, thanks. And like, let's just say that, teenage Salvatore is a handsome young man.
He is. Good looking.
Very handsome young man. Good looking young man. And later he's kind of projecting the film that he shot onto the wall. And Alfredo's like, what is this? Explain it. Describe it to me.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, it's a calf being killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says,
he's like, what's happening now?
What happened now? And he's like, nothing. It's out of focus.
It's out of focus.
And Alfredo just goes, it's a woman.
He just knows.
Yeah. So they kind of talk about this. And, and on a walk, I believe they talk about this. And Toto's like, Salvatore's like, sorry, he's not Toto anymore. Yeah. Salvatore's like, well, she's this, and she's got blue eyes, and and Alfredo's like, the blue-eyed ones will get you.
He's like, that's what they'll get you. You got to watch out.
Get you. Got to watch out. And then he tells this interesting little fantasy story about a young man who waited outside a princess's window because she said, "If you love me, wait outside my house for 100 nights.
Yeah,
and after that, you can come up and we'll be together." So the prince does that for 90 nights, and then
99.
But first 90,
right.
and then he says, and by this time his face had become pale and his eyes had become dry.
Yeah.
And then on the 99th night he went away. And Salvatore's like, right at the end? And Alfredo's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. If you ever figure out what that means, tell me. And I'm like, guys, it's because she didn't love him, and he realized that if she really loved him, that she wouldn't make him do this at all. Is that the point? Do you think that's the point of the story?
I think so.
What do you think?
Like it feels like this. Yeah, it's kind of this idea of like, well, if she actually loved you, you wouldn't have to go through all of this. Like,
you
love
wouldn't
is
have
love.
to become pale and dry.
Yeah, that's what I've taken. Yeah, but I like that. Like they get to the end of the story, and Alfredo's like, "Don't ask me what it means. I don't know. I couldn't.
I don't know. Couldn't tell you." And then they have this funny little scheme, and I might be skipping some things here. So if there's anything important, let me know.
You're getting the broad strokes. There's one little moment I like to mention, which is while they're talking in the booth, Alfredo is like, the picture's out of focus. And he goes to check. He's like, it is. Like, how did you know? He's like, I have my secrets. I still know. Like, I don't have to see to know. It's it's a nice little bit.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
But I think we are pretty much up to the scheme in the church now.
Yeah, so there's a scheme in the church because Alfredo and Salvatore go to church. And Salvatore catches Elena, which is the girl that he's fallen in love with, going to the confession booth, and he sees that the priest is not in the confession booth and talking to someone else. So Salvatore's like, Alfredo, don't ask me why, but can you do me a favor? And Alfredo's like, sure. And he whispers something to Alfredo's ear, and he goes, yeah. And so then Salvatore goes over, and he's like, oh, Father, like, Alfredo needs to speak with you urgently. And the priest's like, well, but I need to start mass. And he's like, no, he needs to talk to you right now. It's an emergency. Priest goes over and Alfredo's like, Father, I'm having doubts. It's really funny. And while this is happening, Salvatore goes into the confessional booth and he opens like the little door and Elena's like, Father, I have sinned. And he's like, save that for later or something like that.
He's like, not now. Come on.
He's like, not right now. I need to talk to you. And she's like, Salvatore, what are you doing in here? And he's like, I just had to talk to you. I love you. You're beautiful. They have this cute little moment where he's like, saying that, and he's like, I'm in love with you. And she's like, I like you, and you're really sweet, but I'm not in love with you. Yeah. And then he didn't learn a single thing from Alfredo's story.
He's like, okay, then I'll do this. Here's my grand gesture.
I'll stand under your window every night until you, until you love me.
Yeah. If you open the shutters, I'll know.
If you open your window, then I'll know that you love me. And then an old woman appears at the other side, and she's like, Father, I have sinned. And he's like, all right, well, you're forgiven, whatever. And and they both laugh, which is very cute. Meanwhile, Alfredo is panicking the priest because Alfredo's like, how did they,
He's like, how did you do miracles? How the fish and the loaves?
Fish.
He's like, I don't buy it. How does that work?
I don't And the priest, that actor's killing it because
he's great. Like, he's doing such a good job.
You're speaking heresy.
Yeah, I can't say that, man. That's blasphemous. It's really funny.
Really
also,
good.
The way that they're photographing Helena through like the lattice work, she looks gorgeous. Like it's just such a beautiful photography of both of them in these tight close-ups as they're talking to each other.
Yeah, just two great-looking young people. You know, you love to see it.
Yeah,
I don't know, just in that they're in love and it's cute.
Yeah.
So then Alfredo kind of wraps up his little bit. He's like, I see now. Thank you. And the father's like, Alfredo, you like, you survived the fire, but like, if you're not careful, you'll
He's like, nothing could save you from the fires of hell.
The fires of hell.
It's like, Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah. And
He
so
lost his sight. Leave him alone.
He was being a heretic, Parker.
Oh, sure.
So anyway, that's kind of how that goes. Salvatore is standing under her window every night. Windows never open. Suddenly it's New Year's Eve, 1953. And she still doesn't open her window. And Salvatore's been standing out in the rain, and he goes home. Or he goes to the projection booth, I should say, which at this point is kind of his home.
Yeah.
He goes to the projection booth, and he's just really sad.
Right.
And then Elena comes to him and is like, Salvatore? Because he tears up the calendar, and he tears up, whatever. And she's like, Salvatore? And they kiss, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the reel doesn't get changed over, and everyone's like, "What happened to the film?" And it's
They don't care.
really sweet. They don't care. They're kissing.
Yeah.
She's wearing a wonderful pink coat. I really like the pink coat. It's great.
There's a very good pink coat.
Again, I already said that Salvatore's sweaters are great, but so Elena's costumes are wonderful as well. So from there, they just have a beautiful summer of being in love. And at one point, their car breaks down, and her dad comes and gets them, and then she sends him a letter. She sends Salvatore a letter where she's like, "I have to go away now." Yeah. Because they're doing an outdoor screening, which is very exciting. So there's, once again, you have the rich and the poor, where there are people who are sitting in the actual seats watching the film be projected outdoors, and then there's people standing on boats in the canal, and it's standing room only, one of them says.
Yeah.
And so they're all watching this outdoor screening. Meanwhile, Salvatore is reading this letter from Elena that's like, basically, I'll be gone all summer, I'm going to this place with my parents.
Yep.
And then, like, we're also moving here for this university.
Yep.
And it's going to be very hard to see you. I don't know when I'll see you again, but, you're right.
Yeah.
And he's like, ugh. And there's this really great moment where he's lying on the cement, and he says, like, ugh, like, why does it have to be until the end of summer? Like, why can't summer just end?
Yeah.
If this were a movie, there would be a storm and a cut. Great. And then there's a big lightning flash. And it starts raining heavily. And Elena appears.
She's just there.
She's there. And
She
he's like,
kisses him.
how? Today? And she's like, you don't know what excuse I had to make. And they kiss. And then Salvatore gets drafted.
Yeah, and during this whole sequence, we've got these silly montages of because they own the Paradiso, but there's another theater in the neighboring town that they share reels with, and so they keep having to go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, and Salvatore's friend who has a birthmark has to keep
bicycling back and forth,
cycling back and forth, and it's not working. But
no.
Again, it doesn't really go anywhere.
No, it's just kind of texture. It's all flavor of like what goes on in these little towns.
And it's lovely, absolutely lovely.
But yeah, then I'm not sure. I don't know how the military worked at that time in Italy. I don't know if he's drafted or if it's like volunteer. Everybody has to do it.
I think you just have to do service, because I think he says, like, I start my military service on this, and I have to do this for this amount of time.
Yeah.
So he goes to the military. And Elena's like, I'll be there to see you off. She doesn't show.
No.
So he takes her picture with him off the wall at the Paradiso and goes off to the military.
Yeah.
And we get brief moments of him calling, trying to figure out where she went, where he can write letters to. He never finds out. He comes home. And I just want to say that I think, I wrote in my notes, everything from him returning from service until he arrives back in town at middle age in the 80s is flawless. And then I said, okay, but actually isn't every part? And what do you think? What do you think, Parker? Do you think that this is we're not quite to the end yet, but do you think this is a perfect movie?
I think so.
Yeah.
Which is we're going to talk about it with the director's cut. It's so fascinating that I think it's a perfect movie by accident.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do think it's a perfect movie.
I love one of those. So he comes back from service, and the square is empty. And there's someone else working the projection booth at the Paradiso. It's just this man smoking a cigarette outside, right?
Yeah.
And he's just kind of confused where everyone went. And then he talks with Alfredo. And it's absolutely gorgeous. Because he's like, yeah, I never found out where Elena went. And Alfredo's like, that must be how it was supposed to happen then. We all have a star to follow. And I actually have the transcript up here. Let's see.
Yeah, it's such a good scene. I'm so glad you have the transcript.
No, yeah, for sure. It's taking me a second to find it if you want to kill some time and say something.
Yeah. It's just like I love the setting of this. I love them down by like the waterfront with the decommissioned anchors all piled up on the cement and it's so visually stunning to look at.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of the scene where they're sitting in, and Alfredo says, "You haven't seen her?" And Salvatore says, "No." And Alfredo says, "Probably that's how it was meant to be. We, each of us, have a star to follow." And then he pivots hard and says, "Get out of here.
Yeah.
This land is cursed. Living here day by day, you think it's the center of the world. You believe nothing will ever change. Then you leave. A year, 2 years. When you come back, everything's changed. The thread's broken. What you come to find isn't there. What was yours is gone. You have to go away for a long time, many years, before you can come back and find your people, the land where you were born. But now, no, it's not possible. Right now, you're blinder than I am." And we get this nice little button on what's been happening throughout the whole movie where Salvatore says, "Who said that? Gary Cooper, James Stewart, Henry Fonda?" And Alfredo says, "No, Toto. Nobody said it. This time it's all me." Life isn't like in the movies. Life is much harder. Get out of here. Go back to Rome. You're young. The world is yours. And I'm old. And I love this. I don't want to hear you talk anymore. I want to hear talk about you.
Yeah.
Don't come back. Don't think about us. Don't look back. Don't write. Don't give in to nostalgia. Forget us all. If you do and you come back, you don't come see me. I won't let you in my house. Understand? And Salvatore says, "Thank you for everything you've done for me." And Alfredo says, "Whatever you end up doing, love it. The way you loved the projection booth when you were a little kid."
And at this point, I'm bawling my eyes out. Like that.
Yeah,
oh,
sure.
Man, that one hits hard.
I find it really interesting because even when I watched it the last time, I was still living at my parents' house in my hometown during the pandemic because I was briefly just living at home and commuting up to college for the first semester of my second year of college. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So I was just already at home. So I was just going to live at home, and I lived at home. And I didn't move out of there again until 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting revisiting this and having had the experience of trying to go back home to my hometown and finding that everyone's gone. I got a little bit of a buffer period after growing up because the pandemic kind of grounded everyone back in our hometown.
Sure.
But I find it so, like, it's so specific.
Yeah.
What he writes here of like 1 to 2 years and it will be gone.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you wait a really long time and you come back, the people that you knew will be there. Mm-hmm. And it's so specific, and yet it feels so universal.
Yeah.
Which is just fascinating. I've never heard it articulated like this. So I wanted to give like a moment for the full moment. And then there's not a lot of dialogue for a little bit here where we see older Salvatore in his 50s reflecting on this moment.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. He reflects on the moment and then yeah,
Salvatore's farewell, where he's at the train station and his mother and his sister hug him. And I love how they shoot this, where it's hands on his back, and it's weird little things around the train station that feel so much like what you would remember about the moment, because you wouldn't necessarily remember the faces of the people that you've known your whole life or these things. You'd remember very specific sensations, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd remember, like, I feel like when something so life-changing is happening, I feel like there's always one moment where you're sitting there and you look at something on the ground or around you that you just like anchor on.
Right.
And that becomes a seared part of your brain, is just that one weird thing that happened to be around when you were having this big moment in your life. And I think that's captured really well here, of like the sensations of it at first. And then he has his goodbye with Alfredo, where he says like, "Don't come back," right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, "Forget about us."
That's when he says that. I read it all, didn't I?
No, I think he repeats himself. He does. He
okay.
He
It's not in the
sentiment.
it's not in the transcript here, so I wasn't sure if I missed it. But he repeats it, where he's like,
I think it's the same sort of sentiment. At least
he says like, "I never want to see you."
He's like,
again.
"Never come back. Never come back. Only go forward." Like, yeah.
Yeah. We also missed the moment where when Salvatore first comes back from military service, he goes and visits Alfredo, and Alfredo, he says, "What happened? No, everyone says that you don't come out anymore." You don't talk to anyone. And he says, well, when you get to a certain age, you learn that no one wants to hear you talk, so it's better if you just stop talking. Something like that was just like a random thing that I forgot.
Yeah.
But really, it's just Salvatore's goodbye here is the end of our flashback. And what another little note that I think is perfect is as the train leaves and Salvatore's on his way to never return, the priest runs out and is like, oh, did I miss him? Oh, too late. What a shame.
Yeah.
I wanted to say goodbye. And I think that's such an interesting moment to have Alfredo so firmly say, everyone you knew is gone. No one's here. And then obviously to still have someone there that didn't get to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Who he still could have gone and seen. But like the sentiment still rings true. Like, it's not like all of those people really disappeared. It's just that things change, right? Yeah. Like, it's, I don't know, that the inclusion of the priest there almost seeming like, oh, what a shame.
Yeah.
Is like also so interesting and I think perfectly done in that it lessens the seriousness of Alfredo's thing, but also doesn't make it not true.
Right.
If that makes sense. So anyway.
Totally.
And from this point on, we're just with middle-aged Salvatore as he returns home for the first time in 30 years. He comes back. I love the shot of when his mother goes to get the door and she had been knitting and it is stuck to her as she leaves. And we just linger on the thread as it follows her and then stops when she reaches the door and says hi. I think that's just a wonderful shot. And then
it's a really good shot.
Like kind of moves over to the window and we see the cab driving away. Just really excellent, like telling us what's going on without showing us directly. And there's that really funny line where she says, oh, are you tired? Like you have time to rest before the funeral. And Salvatore says, no, Mama, it's only an hour by plane. And she says, don't tell me that after all these years.
Yeah.
But later she also, we'll get to that. So anyway, she takes him into the room. She's moved all of his things in there. I feel like, did the summary take way too long?
Nah, it's okay.
She takes him into the room and there's all the pictures and like his bike's there. And there's like picture of him as kid, picture of him as teen, which is it was really nice seeing those two actors next to each other.
Yeah.
Framed in different photos. That also kind of made me emotional. And she's got like his old like projector and 8mm camera film there. And at the funeral for Alfredo, they're all kind of walking and Alfredo's wife says, come see me before you leave. He left something for you.
Yeah.
And then they pass the Cinema Paradiso
and
it's all closed up. The procession stops and it's all closed up. It's all boarded up and falling apart and dilapidated. And at this point, Salvatore turns around and he recognizes people in the crowd, which I think is really lovely.
It is. Like you and I talk about a lot that like we have a personal preference of like when you age up the actors, just cast different actors. But this is the one exception where I'm like, it has to be the same people. And you can put them in old age makeup, but like it has to be them so that we as the audience are experiencing what he's experiencing. And I think it's wonderfully done. Yeah,
it's really, really wonderful. So he goes up to the old Neapolitan who had bought and managed the Nuovo Cinema Paradiso and says, when did you close it down? He says, 6 years ago in May, nobody came anymore. You know better than me, Mr. De Vita. The economy, TV, videos. The old movie, he says, the cinema is just a memory. And the city bought the site for a parking lot. And I went, God, of course it's a parking lot.
Of course it's a parking lot.
As someone who's lived in Salt Lake City for many years, I have a huge hatred for tearing down buildings for the sake of parking. And then Salvatore's kind of like, what's this Mr. De Vita? Like, why would you call me that? You used to order me around. And so... then he calls him Toto again.
Because he's like it's hard to be He's like it's hard to be informal with someone so important, and we don't know why he's important. Nobody's said yet, and you don't find out until the very end. And I love that. But like everybody's giving him this respect.
Yeah. But then he calls him Toto. Just to be like, and he's like, who would have believed it, Toto? After the funeral, Salvatore goes to Alfredo's wife, and she gives him the thing that Alfredo left for him, which is a film canister with some film wrapped up in newspaper, and he's like, okay, whatever. And she says that he was furious. Once your mother said to him that if he wanted it, you'd surely come back. And he was furious and said, no, Toto must never come back to Giancarlo. And yeah, his mom catches him kind of revisiting his footage of Elena from when he was younger. And then
they have a
then he
conversation
kind of-
in the kitchen, and he's like,
Yeah.
I never should have left. And she's like, you needed to go. Like, it was
Yeah.
important that you went. And she's like, but I will say, like, every time I call you, a different woman picks up the phone. And I've
Yeah.
never once heard the voice of someone who loves you.
Yeah.
And she's like, she's like, just as your mother, like, maybe I want you to settle down.
Yeah. But she also said, which I think is really nice, of like, he's like, I ran out on you like a bandit without any explanation. She's like, I never asked for one. You don't have to explain to me.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it was good what you did. But then, like you said, then they have that little back and forth of like a different woman always answers. And then she says, but your life is there. Here, there are only ghosts. Let go.
Yeah.
So then he leaves.
Mm-hmm.
He returns back to, Rome or wherever he is.
Mm-hmm.
Gives the film to his projectionist. And he says, oh, yeah. Right. And I liked your film, by the way. Terrific.
Yeah.
That's where we find out he makes films.
Mm-hmm.
He's a filmmaker now.
And the projectionist is the director. It's
Really?
Yeah, Tornatore.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Wonderful. Tornatore.
Mm-hmm.
And they project the film. And it's all those damn kisses that Alfredo cut out.
Yeah.
They said he was his. That's what the films that he promised him when he was younger. So, nothing to say about that, Mark.
I mean, I could cry on mic if you'd like.
I just love like, and it's this, and Burger, you're like,
Yeah. It just again, I had seen that clip before, completely removed from context. I'm like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
Watching it in context is just devastating. It's just so emotionally wrought of his relationship with Alfredo, his relationship to cinema, our relationship with cinema. Because I love that, like, the projection starts and we stay on his reaction. And there's this really great, like, pan around him as he, like, leans forward in his chair. He's like, oh my God. And we see kind of over his shoulder watching. And we keep cutting back and forth between the screen and him. And eventually, the projection is just being shown to us. We don't see the artifice anymore. We don't see the screen or him. It's just what is being shown to us directly. And I love that. I love that we go inside the projection and are there with him. And it's just all of these lovely clips of people kissing and embracing and just like, it's such a celebration of why we make movies and just capturing human interaction.
So why do we make movies, Parker?
I think we make movies because we as human beings are like fundamentally in our DNA called to record history and record our own history and to tell our own stories. And what I love about this montage that leans into that is like, yeah, we have been expressing love to each other the same way for 100 years or more. Like, the kiss is something that is so universal and so fundamentally human. And I love that. And I think that, like, I've always read it as, like, we make films to tell our own stories and share our own stories and say, this is what life was like at this point in time. And this is what our vision of what life could be like in the future, in the past, or in some escapist place. But it is always a vision of what we have been and what we could be.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Okay, well, great.
Why do we?
That's the answer. So thanks everybody for listening. I think what Cinema Paradiso captures really well is, I mean, there's literally someone who dies while watching a movie because there's a gunshot and he has a heart attack. And he's
well,
like,
no,
clearly...
he gets shot. The dude
Does he
behind
really
him has
get
a
shot?
gun.
Oh, I missed
because
that.
he's
I
like
thought
he's involved with crime, and they wait for the gunshot in the movie.
Oh,
he falls forward,
that.
and there's a smoking gun behind him. And they tuck it back in.
Oh well, I'm so sorry then. Sorry. We live and die.
Did you even watch the movie?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
We live and die in the cinema,
Mm-hmm.
and also death and love on film. Like, especially with like Salvatore capturing like the slaughtering of the calf, and also Elena. Like when the minute that he is given film that he can use, He captures death and he captures love. I love the line where Toto says to Alfredo, like, you make the world. Because Alfredo's telling him, like, this is how the world works. And he says, you make the world. But also, I think, as a film projectionist, you kind of do put worlds in front of people.
Yeah.
You are kind of making a world. The community crying and laughing and experiencing together, cinema as church, but also film as scripture. Everything that Alfredo says to Toto that is a line is like reciting scripture to him.
Yeah, it's like a psalm. It's, a proverb.
Right. So you get it. Something else that I find interesting about this, and we talked about visual language earlier, is that there is never a moment in which someone tries to explain why film is so important.
Yeah.
And why cinema is so important. No one ever sits down and goes, God, the magic of movies is. It's not that. It's entirely visual.
Yeah.
It is entirely just showing us why cinema is entrancing, why it matters, why people like it, why people come together for it, what it can do for people, what it can do to people, and why we make it. But it doesn't say it in words.
No.
In fact, at a certain point, Alfredo says life isn't like the movies, almost condemning film as like, this is something that we can aspire to but never achieve.
Right.
And yet at the same time, Salvatore does kind of achieve it with moments with Elena. There's moments that are film, because this is a film. But life still can be that. It's just not always like a film. Life is hard, Alfredo says. That's what he's learned. I don't know. I just find all of that very interesting. And then at the end to say that the cinema has become a memory. I also find that very interesting, of like, even in the 80s being like, yeah, we don't come together as a community to watch movies anymore. Which is something that we are constantly plagued by in this modern era of like, yes, we still go to movies, and when we go to a movie and we watch something with an audience, sometimes there is that really magical experience. Parker and I went and saw a movie last week that I think was absolutely that kind of experience, where you're like, oh my God, we connected with these people because we were all laughing together the entire time.
Go see Hundreds of Beavers.
Go see Hundreds of Beavers if you can. The guy behind us fell asleep. Did you hear that? There was someone behind us who was just snoring. And I was like,
out.
Should we wake him up? Because there was no one. He was in the one row with one seat. So there was no one next to him to wake him up. I don't know. It celebrates movies without doing it in that really saccharine, corny way. It's not the ending of Babylon.
No.
Where Babylon's like, and then movies, and don't we all love movies? And it's like, yeah, but don't say it, please.
Yeah.
Like, don't, because then you risk, just, but this just does, anyway, that's my biggest take on Cinema Paradiso, is that it shows the influence that movies can have on us in like almost a spiritual sense, in that it is a church.
Yeah.
In that, and I've said this before a lot, that like, nowadays, it feels like pop culture is a church, in that if you don't study the scripture, then people constantly make references to, then you're a little behind, and people see you as a heretic if you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah,
especially like the classics, the canon, like any 80s movie. I don't know, just a lot of thoughts on Cinema Paradiso this time, Parker.
I'm so glad,
because I wasn't trying to watch it as Parker.
Oh, good. Yeah, you never should.
And yeah, that's kind of my biggest. Last thoughts on
I think that's wonderful. Really quick before we get into criteria, I do want to touch on so the director's cut unintentionally just guts the entire message of the movie, because the biggest change that the director cut brings, I don't know exactly where it happens in the timeline. I don't know if it's before the funeral or after the funeral. Whenever adult Salvatore comes back, he is walking around town and he sees a young girl who looks like Helena, and he's like, huh? And he follows her, and she goes home, and he realizes that it's Helena's daughter, and Helena is back. And she's married now, and they reconnect. And he's like, where were you? Like, what happened? And she's like, oh, like I was traveling around with my dad, and then I met this guy, and we got married and all this stuff. And they have sex in the back of her car and start having an affair. And
he's not in town for that long.
No. She reveals to him that it was like, she did come back at a certain point after he left, and Alfredo's like, don't contact him. Like, he needs to live. He needs to go do his thing. And she's like, but I didn't listen to him. I left you a note. Like, I wrote where I was going on the back of one of the invoices. And he's like, I never saw it. And so he's like, come back to Rome with me. Like, we should live a life together. And she's like, I have a life. Like, I'm sorry. And so she leaves. He goes to the Paradiso before they tear it down, and he finds the invoice.
Interesting. Okay, because he does. We did forget to mention he does go back to the Paradiso in the final cut. Mm-hmm. So he finds the note there.
I'm assuming it's during that scene. Yeah, he finds the note, and it's just like, well, that's. But
that doesn't make sense either, though, because he was gone for 2 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen the director's cut, so I don't know exactly how all this lines up. But that's the big 50-minute change is they bring Helena back.
Wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Keep that out.
Yeah. Their romance is so magical and is very pure and cute, and like I think it fundamentally detracts from the message of the movie, because like the whole thing is like you can never go back, and it's like, well, if she's just there, then what are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? You can't go back. Of course you go back. You go have sex in the back of the car. Go nuts. So I don't like that. Well,
change. I also love his mother saying, you know, I want you to settle down. And then he goes home and watches a bunch of people kiss and probably rediscovers what love can look like.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So that's that big change that I wanted to make mention of. And
that's the cut that Giuseppe was like, this is what I really wish I'd been able to
and
show
most people it's kind of a Star Wars special edition thing where everybody's like, the theatrical is better. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right.
Because, to be fair, coming back to your movie 15, almost 20 years later, and then being like, actually, this is how it's meant to be. I think, like, you as the filmmaker are also too far removed from it at that point. Like, you've been gestating on it too long. And I think art should be capturing that moment and that instinct. And, like,
yeah,
that's the version that won all these awards. Like, clearly it's good, and clearly you were happy with it.
Yeah, but like, that's the thing about art and artists, is that we never actually want to stop making art.
Totally.
Like, we never want to stop working on one thing. Just at a certain point we have to say, I guess this is it.
Yeah.
And sometimes people seem to give into the instinct of, no, but I can still get it exactly right. And like, no, just that's the thing, is you have to put it out eventually, and then you have to leave it.
Right. So don't give in to nostalgia. They say it in this movie.
Don't look back.
Don't look back.
Wow. Yeah. Way to go, Parker. You brought it around. Criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Great. What?
So, historical and technical relevance.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What impact did this have, if any?
I'll pull the card I always pull. It was parodied on The Simpsons. It's actually you should watch it. It's really cute. It's really fun. Bart like hits his head or something happens. Bart passes out, and there's a girl that he likes that rushes over. She's like, I know CPR. She starts giving him CPR, and it plays the music, and they do Simpsons animated versions of a lot of different movie kisses. There's a couple from this. Like, there's a couple ones. There's the James Cagney, like, pushing the pie in the face thing. But they do the Wally kiss in there, and I think that's really cute that they added it in.
Oh, wait. So this was later. This was,
it was.
Not in the...
No. Yeah, this is, like, probably early 2010s, I think, is when this episode airs.
All right.
But yeah, so they have the Wally kiss in there and a couple others, and it's cute. It's fun.
Okay.
But that's all that's all I have to say about it. I don't think it's breaking any ground technically, although something that I do like, and I don't know if it's just the print I have access to or if it's this way across the board, but it does seem like watching it this time, I noticed that as the movie progresses, the film stock gets cleaner. Like, it's very grainy at the beginning, and it feels almost intentional. And then it kind of clears up a little bit more as the movie goes.
Interesting. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. I don't know. That might just be a me thing, but it was just something I was like, if that's intentional, that's very interesting. I like that.
That is very interesting. Yeah.
But I think Kane takes the point.
How well do you think it's doing what it's trying to do?
Again, sort of by accident, if we're going by the director's cut, the theatrical cut is doing it flawlessly. I think it is a perfect movie.
Which, in fairness, he did also cut and release.
Totally. Like, it's not like somebody else
a studio did it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just he came back and decided he wanted to mess around with it some more. But, like, as it existed at the time, and because, like, something's very interesting is that apparently in the lead up during like the press junket, he was talking about how like this was his like basically like a funeral knell for cinema. He's like, this is me saying goodbye to cinema because it's dying and it's dead. And then when the movie became super successful, he never brought that point up again. Like it never comes up in another interview. I just think that's really funny. He's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like cinema, it's dead. And then he starts making money. He's like, oh, actually, cinema's so back. We've never been so back. It's just funny.
Yeah,
but
really
I think it is doing what it's trying to do pretty flawlessly. What do you think?
I think it's a perfect movie. I think it's a perfect movie.
We got a perfect movie.
I give Cinema Paradiso the point.
Nice. I would also give it the point.
But emotionally,
I don't know. It doesn't really affect me. I don't know. I don't feel much when I watch this.
point goes to Cinema Paradiso.
Yeah, obviously. Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's really, really good. I don't know. So criteria says it's better. What do we say? Like taking a step back.
Yeah, I think it's better.
I think it's better.
Do you think Salvatore likes Citizen Kane?
All I'm saying is that it doesn't show up. It doesn't get mentioned.
Tisk tisk. Do you think they played it at the Cinema Paradiso and people didn't like it, or do you think they loved it?
I don't think people at the Paradiso liked it.
I think the rich people didn't like it.
Sure.
I think the poor people might have been like laughing and cheering when he was throwing shit around a room.
That's fair. That's a good point.
I think they might have liked it. Well, great.
Yeah.
Cinema Paradiso.
Cinema Paradiso.
Hard recommend.
Better than
Hard
Citizen
recommend.
Kane.
Big
Hard
recommend.
This is probably like if I was to narrow down like 5 movies to suggest that we've covered out of like what we've done like 35 now. What?
Yeah, this is our 35th. Yeah.
Wow, love that. Yeah, like this would be in that top 5 where I'm like, watch this one. If you're gonna watch any of them, like this is one of the ones to watch because it's I don't know, it's special.
Very special. I love it.
Yeah. Well, Max, what are we watching next time?
Next time we are jumping forward almost 40 years as we cover a recent release, Jordan Peele's Nope. We aren't starting with Get Out.
No. Why would we?
Nope. Because I want to rewatch Nope, man. I haven't seen it in maybe 2 years.
Yeah, I think
I saw it twice in 2022, and then I haven't revisited it.
Yeah, I think I've watched it also twice. But
I think about it all the time.
Yeah,
it is stuck in my head, and I think it might be a fave of mine, and I just want to find out. I own it on Blu-ray, so
yeah, you gotta figure that out.
So I can't wait. I'm stoked. Just really excited. Everyone revisit Nope with us because I can't wait.
Looking forward to it.
Well, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
For joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.